Hey guys, my name is Ryan, and I'm going to be doing a report on Cai Yuanpei, a leading educator in China in the 1900s. And I'm going to be presenting his life in a draw my life format. So I'm going to be drawing his life and his story while doing the voiceover in the background. So hopefully you guys enjoy it, and without further ado, let's get right into it.
So throughout this video, I'm going to be covering Cai Yuanpei's background, his works, and his influence. Firstly, let's start with his background. He was an influential figure in early 20th century China, and he was born in 1868 and died at the age of 72. He was a dedicated anti-communist who was associated with the liberal movement in China as one of the leaders and educators of the Revolutionary Party. He was also the Republic's first Minister of Education, the Chancellor of Beijing University from 1916 to 1926, and he was the founder and first president of the Academic Sinica, China's highest national research institute. Cai was noted for his pioneering work in reforming the system of traditional education and his efforts to synthesize Chinese and Western educational ideas. Let's move on to what his life and journey was like. Firstly, he was well off. He was born in Shaoxing, Zhejiang province, and he was raised in a comfortable environment as his dad was a bank manager. Cai was also well educated. He received traditional education and revolved around the knowledge of classics and completion of civil service exams. At the age of 22, he successfully completed his exams and earned the title of doctorate, or Jinshi. He became a member of the Hanlin Academy, which at the time was the greatest academic honor. Cai also went on multiple pursuits and garnered numerous accolades. In his pursuit for Western knowledge and ideas, he translated European books to understand why the West was successful. He traveled around the world to study and write textbooks, and he is notably an alma mater of Leipzig University in Germany. He also organized the Sino-French Educational Association while studying in France. Furthermore, Cai was politically involved. He resigned from his position in 1912 to protest against Yuan Shikai, who was the first president of the Republic of China, famed for his autocratic style of rule. Let's move on to Cai Yuanpei's works. Firstly, his critique of traditional education. Cai published his first book in 1901 called The On-School Curriculum, which analyzed his early experience and thought, and also deeply criticized his own educational upbringing. Cai wanted to reason out the limitations of traditional education, and in doing so, he used 6 ideograms or symbols to summarize his critique. Firstly, B, or vulgar. This term was used because traditional education mainly focused on teaching students how to pass the civil service exams, thus forcing them to consider that the only goal of learning was personal gain. Second, blank, or disordered. This symbol was used because nothing in traditional education was designed for children's needs in particular, or for human development in general. The only thing being taught was the classical texts. Third, fu, or superficial. Superficial was used because the dominant method of learning included memorizing classical texts. Fourth, si, or fearful. This symbol was used because teachers had absolute authority of forcing students to learn. However, the students themselves were not allowed to question their teachers. Thus, students had no freedom to pursue learning for learning's sake. Fifth, zhi, or discouraging. Discouraging was used because school was viewed as a prison, due to the pressure that was placed on students. Lastly, T, or deceptive. Deceptive was used to describe the outcome of the civil service exams. The schooling was irrelevant, and selected bureaucrats formed a privileged caste who took care to protect each other. Ultimately, Cai concluded that the traditional education system did not adequately prepare students for the Chinese way of life, due to its philosophy centering on the exam system, and that its aim had no consideration for the human community. He also pointed out that all teachers should have the courage to free themselves from traditional education. Lastly, he suggested a new type of education that was organically linked to society and culture. Third, let's move on to Cai's fusion of Chinese and Western ideas, and his 5 types of education. Cai wanted to improve Chinese education, and he found that the best way to do so was to choose and combine the best aspects from both Chinese and Western cultures. His efforts to blend these ideas is captured through his formulation of the 5 types of education. During Cai's tenure as Minister of Education, he proposed educational policies that revolved around 5 types of education, which are as follows. Firstly, military education. Cai wanted to defend China for purposes of national survival, and he deemed it necessary and urgent at the time when there were threats with foreign aggression. Thus, he wanted to foster military education. Second, utilitarian education. Cai wanted to borrow Western sciences to promote utilitarian education, and he clarified that utilitarian education is a matter of priority due to poverty and lack of organization in the industrial sector in China. Cai believed that a modern education system should achieve utilitarian goals such as fostering human intelligence as well as economic development. Third, moral education. Cai wanted to merge Western scientific spirit with a traditionally Chinese moral point of view, as he knew that otherwise, corruption and hostility was a result. As for the principles of moral education itself, Cai placed great significance on national morality, and he viewed it as an intrinsic attribute of human life. He looked down on obsolete precepts such as loyalty to the emperor and Confucian values, believing them to violate the spirit of the Republican era. However, he saw fit other traditional ideas of morality, and he wanted to transfer them and carry forward those principles in modernizing Chinese education. Fourth, worldview education. Cai wanted to develop the conception of reality and the understanding of the unity of mankind, and he hoped to fulfill this by introducing worldview education and what he called an introduction to a worldwide approach. He believed in Kantian principles of a phenomenal and nominal world, which is the world as we see it versus the world as it really is. And he believed that a lack of proper worldview will lead to materialism and selfishness. Lastly, aesthetic education. Cai viewed aesthetic education as necessary, as learning about artistic appreciation, for instance, was needed to build students' lives in an active and joyful way. Next, let's talk about Cai's work on the independence of education. Cai was a strong proponent of the independence of education, and he wanted it to be free from political and religious influence. He developed an administrative plan to safeguard the independence of Chinese education, which was modeled by the French education system. This plan involved establishing university districts in multiple regions, and each district had a university to supervise all levels of district education. The Education Committee would control the university and educational affairs, and also elect the university chancellor. Together, all the chancellors from each district would form a higher education council to discuss important matters and direct educational policy. However, this plan was unrealistic and proved to be a failure. Even when Cai persuaded the nationalist government to approve it when the Kuomintang took over China, during which he was appointed president of the University Council, his idea of a university council was short-lived and lasted for less than a year. Despite his failures, Cai continued to develop his thoughts on issues such as academic freedom and democratic administration. He stressed that a democratic administration should accept suggestions made by the masses and encourage reforms where needed. Cai later became the chancellor of Beijing University, where he tried his best to implement democracy and initiated successful reforms in university administration. He organized the Pingyihui Executive Committee to direct the institution, allowing the faculty to participate more in university decisions. He also set up the Jiaoshuhui Professors Committee, which was an academic body responsible for the curriculum. Due to his reforms, many students formed student organizations to serve the campus activities. Lastly, Cai adhered to academic freedom, and he created an open policy which allowed Beijing University to recruit renowned scholars including Chen Duxiu, who was the editor of New Youth, a radical journal, and the later founder of the Chinese Communist Party, and Hu Shi, who was a leader of the literary revolution. Cai turned Beijing University into a cultural and intellectual interchange center, and massively improved his reputation. Lastly, let's talk about Cai's overall influence on modern China. His influence on Chinese education can be embodied in four aspects. Firstly, the history of Chinese educational reform. Cai helped people to realize that Confucian values had limitations, and this discovery, coupled with his efforts to fuse Chinese and Western ideas, initiated the modernization of Chinese education. Secondly, his formulation of the 5 types of education. This conceptualization of education at this point was completely unheard of, and his emphasis on scientific knowledge and social action helped to modernize in bringing a scientific aspect to the education curriculum. Also, in promoting aesthetic education, he completely changed the attitude towards the teaching of artistic subjects, which had been traditionally despised. Thirdly, his leadership as Beijing University Chancellor. During this tenure, he carried out multiple impactful reforms. He stimulated creativity and research, and he completely reorganized university administration to fall in line with his beliefs of democracy. Cai's promotion of academic freedom also elevated the reputation of Beijing University, and it led to a more intellectual community and sparked students' learning interests. Lastly, his claim for independence of education. Cai inspired democratic education in China, especially with the way he treated problems such as the role of political ideals on education and the stability of educational policies. Overall, because of Cai's impact, numerous scholars have devoted themselves to his work. A conference was even held at Beijing University in 1988 to celebrate his birth.
So yeah, that's the end of the video. Hopefully you guys learned a lot about Cai Yuanpei and his life. And yeah, thanks for watching.